So apparently, Shadows Upon Time brought me back to the internet to talk about books. Did it stick the landing? Kind of. I am, of course, talking about Shadows Upon Time, book number 7 of the Sun Eater series by Christopher Ruocchio. If you are familiar with my videos, you know anything about my feelings toward this series. It's that, other than Red Rising, I have this as my greatest sci-fi series I've ever read. Granted, I have not read a ginormous amount of sci-fi, but I completely fell in love with the series. The entire premise that Ruocchio set up for us, in his own words, what if Anakin becoming Darth Vader was the right thing to do, had me intrigued from the jump. This grew into something truly epic, and every single book that I read, I loved, I fell in love with deeply. I bought all these special editions, signed editions, all these Kickstarters. I don't regret doing any of that. When it finally gets to Shadows Upon Time, though, and this is obviously a series review as well as Shadows Upon Time review, I don't love the direction of Hadrian as a character, and that is largely why I dislike so much of this book in particular. So my general spoiler-free thoughts of Shadows Upon Time is that it is a very, very, very flawed piece of work. Overall, I liked most of it. I have some major problems with it, though, and I'll get into that in the spoiler section. But if you saw any of my updates throughout my reading on Goodreads, you saw ultimately my rating that I gave it. If you go by what Goodreads says, 2 out of 5 stars means it was okay. And ultimately, that's kind of where I land on this because of my gripes with it. The direction of Hadrian as a character, I thought the pacing was off in a lot of places. I thought it was odd that, and this is all spoiler-free, that so much repetition happened in this book, and you get perspectives of the same scene or event from multiple characters, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Ruocchio has done in any of the other books. And it goes on for chapters of seeing the same thing from other people's eyes. I don't know why that was used here, especially when this is a retelling of Hadrian's life from Hadrian. I thought this definitely could have been cut down. I don't think it needed to be, 930 whatever pages it was. It felt a little bloated to me, much like Sanderson books have become to me in Stormlight. I don't think you need quite so many pages to tell this story anymore. The lore is all great. The world building is phenomenal. I loved Hadrian as a character much of this series. But some of the other flaws of his writing really shine through here, which I already mentioned, the repetition. Hey, look, I'm repeating it. The side characters. Side characters have so much potential in these books, and they almost always flop. Now, again, it's Hadrian telling you his life story, so I get it. Side characters are not the focus. This is not a multi-POV story, but it's almost like, why even bother with some of them with how little characterization they get? The female characters in this series, outside of Valka, have almost no character to them whatsoever, and if they did earlier in the series, they don't anymore. The overuse and reliance on Deus Ex Machina in this book really started to irritate me. I love a good Deus Ex Machina. I love a good, cavalry show up at the last moment to save the day. Don't get me wrong, but when you do it multiple times in a book, and sometimes multiple times in the same fight, it's just like, what are we even doing? Like, this is so goofy. And maybe I can just ignore all this and say, hey, this is a unreliable narrator. Hadrian is just retelling things. Maybe it didn't even happen the way that he writes it in his retelling of his own life, but like, that's the book that I have in front of me, and it bothered me. So where do I land on this book before I jump into spoilers? This book was very good for most of it. And then some of the things that were set up in Disquiet Gods that came into this book really took away from the story for me. And that's mostly what I'm going to focus on in the spoiler section. So overall, it was okay as a book and as a finale. The fact that the finale ends the way that it does is really why I'm struggling with the series overall now, because I absolutely adored the first 5.5 books. Like, I even think I gave Disquiet Gods 5 out of 5 when I read it. There were some nitpicky things that I did have about that book that I don't know if I even dove into it. Did I do a review?
Nope.
Is that on my channel? I don't even know if I did. Probably.
Mama's wrong again.
There are just some things here that took away from the finale of the book. The closest thing that I likened this to immediately upon finishing it was season 8 of Game of Thrones, which is almost never a good thing. I looked at this as something that was so well thought out, so fleshed out, so expansive, so incredible. The sci-fi elements in here, the themes that we focus on throughout, all these things that the series focused on, what it chose to end on really soured for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that the series overall is still great. Empire of Silence was a fantastic starting off point, even if you think it's redundant of other sci-fi books or series. It was a great premise, a great start, and I liked Hadrian from the beginning. Howling Dark, Book 2, was fantastic. Demon in White, Book 3, topped that. Book 4, Kingdoms of Death, like really super dark, but just by the time you get to like halfway-ish through Disquiet Gods, there's a turning point in the series of Hadrian as a character that I just don't personally love, and I feel like that was doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down in this book, and I'm going to jump into spoilers to talk about that. So overall thoughts on the series. If you love sci-fi, you love space operas, you are really going to ride or die for Hadrian as a character, as a POV, as a narrator. If you don't like Hadrian, you're going to dislike this series, just full stop. I was on board with him until about halfway through Disquiet Gods. Shadows Upon Time, he kind of lost me a bit. So let's talk spoilers now of why I'm struggling so much with this book, why it kind of soured me a little bit on the series. If you want like my super duper TLDR, yes, you should still read it. Again, this is my opinion on it. The things that bothered me the most are a certain direction that the character went. You may completely disagree. It looks like most of Goodreads and the internet already disagrees and that this is a 5 out of 5 masterpiece. I just don't see it that way. So let's jump into why now. Okay, so spoilers. A couple of things here. I mentioned it briefly in the spoiler-free thoughts, but the book was too long. Just full stop. I mean, that's a problem I have with a lot of sci-fi and fantasy these days. You don't need this many pages and this long-winded of explanations to get to the point. I'm not going to go as far as to say what I felt like in Stormlight or Wheel of Time, where it's like you could cut X amount of books out. You could cut X amount of pages out. I don't want to do that. I don't feel like that's fair. But I can say this felt bloated. Disquiet Gods did a little bit to me, but I still was so into it that I loved it. The series as a whole probably could have done with some editing, just in general. Beyond that, that was one of my minor gripes. A couple of my major gripes. One is side characters. Now, I get it. This is Hadrian's tale. He's retelling his story, how he blew up a sun, he murdered billions, he killed the Sea Elson. Character-wise, though, like, you do meet some along the way, and I never felt outside of Valka that any of them even mattered. Like, Switch was such an emphasis in book 1, and then you don't see him again. And, like, I was like, oh, I guess he's just a throwaway. Much of the Red Company throughout the series, you don't really get a ton of characterization outside of the side stories and the, appendices, essentially, which they're fantastic. I love those. They're great. But, like, your main story, I feel like, could have had more character work there. And when a bunch of them died in Kingdoms of Death, I was like, oh no, anyway, like I didn't care. And then like Valka's death affected me because she was always there and she was ride or die with Hadrian and she was a good counterpoint to Hadrian. And I feel like once she died in Disquiet Gods, no side characters were left to do anything in this series. And maybe that's indicative of how Hadrian felt writing his life after Valka. Like maybe that is just, he felt a certain way about that and now this is what you get. Like, none of these characters really ever meant anything to him other than Cassandra, which even then, Hadrian as a character was written to care so much about those around him that if you were going to the lengths of writing them into your story and retelling why they're important, I feel like they should have been able to do more in the book. Cassandra was basically sidelined to do two things. To say, Abba, why are you trying to kill yourself? And let me go with you. And Hadrian pushing her to the side and not letting it happen. She was then also there as a bodyguard in the scenes when he needed her to be there as a bodyguard. Ruocchio basically didn't let her do anything else. And she dies and then comes back because of course she does. And Hadrian dies again and comes back because of course he does. The only characters that die permanently in this book or this series don't matter. Because the ones that do matter to the story or they need to be there for a plot scene, they come back to life somehow. Whether it's they narrowly escape from something, they literally die and come back. Selene. What has Selene done in this series? She cries. She gasps. She gets talked down to. She gets put in fugue and then talked down to again. Like, is she just there to be a damsel in distress? Like, you couldn't make her a character? Even when you get to the point when the emperor is like, Selene, you're going to be empress. Hadrian, I need you to rule because she needs you. And then a couple chapters later, he's like, Hadrian, you're the emperor. Selene's going to rule with you, but I can't have her be in power. But either way, you're actually in power. Hadrian is a dumbass. Like, he sidelines Cassandra, who is a smaller version of him who could actually help him in a lot of these cases, and then brings Selene back to Earth with him so that she can get captured. When you had Valka there, you had a counterbalance to Hadrian's character. You had her checking his process, his decisions. By the time that she dies from that point on, and the time in Disquiet Gods when he meets God, through the end of Shadows Upon Time, no one can tell him a goddamn thing. Because everything is divine intervention. Everything is the quiet. Everything is, my God said, I have to do this thing. It must be, therefore it must be. No amount of conversation, politicking, debate ever matters because his entire character gets boiled down to, my God asked me to do this thing, I'm going to do it. Don't get me started on the whole God's plan to have you save humanity, murder this Yeltsin. Your God's plan, this ultimate being of omniscience that can do all these things, bring you back from the dead, decides to give you superpowers to resurrect, and then empower you to blow up a sun, to murder an entire race of people, and then also uphold a fascistic regime that you then immediately turn over to a spoiled little asshole fascist with the Chantry still alive. Like, the entire point was to save humanity and destroy the Yeltsin. You said your God sent you here to do that. One, it annoyed the hell out of me because it takes personal agency away from Hadrian as a character. Because it all boils down to this entire retelling, this entire story was just God's plan. It takes away from his character, and he's less interesting. And he argues again and again and again with everybody that God is telling him to do this, and that's why everything is happening. And you're all stupid because my God sent me here, and that's why it has to be this way. And that just bugs the shit out of me. The plot convenience of so many things happening, like the Deus Ex Machina and these fights where I open a door and there's 100 soldiers waiting for me, and like I've seen my death a million times by now, and Cassandra's death, and then something I didn't see in my vision was, the executors are actually on my side and they help me. And then just like, Lorien shows up. And then, Lorien and everybody's dead. Oh, wait, just kidding. They all somehow escaped the astrophage when everyone, including Hadrian, was just like, this is the only ship in the entire galaxy that could possibly have a chance to get away from this thing. It's fine. All your boys are alive. They all got out because they're all really smart too. So that, I don't know. Again, like no one, he's not willing to kill anybody. Like, even Cassandra, like when they all get mind controlled on the ship, like that was a genuinely terrifying thing to have happen and gruesome scenes. And Cassandra should have stayed dead. Like, I think that would have been better for the story than sidelining her to do the two things that she does the entire book and repeat the same lines over and over again. Her being embraced by Hadrian and then her turning on her high matter sword and killing them both, that was dope. Like, that should have just stayed like that. That was truly horrific. All the people just turning on each other. That being introduced and then basically kneecapped later on because, like, she comes back. The but they're able to basically like outrun the powers this time, and then it doesn't happen again. Like that should have just been the end of a lot of it. Alexander surviving, and like Hadrian has all these visions, and he's supposed to be the reason that so much of this happens and like has to be. But his enemies are always one step ahead of him. Doraica is always one step ahead of him. Alexander is one step ahead of him. The Chantry are one step ahead of him. Like, he's always so smart, but then he's not. Like, he fucks up constantly. And maybe that's a character flaw that could have been interesting if he wasn't supposed to be this, like, divine being, God's messenger to do a thing, but he's constantly terrible. And, like, everyone always outsmarts him. But then he wins anyway. Like, I don't know. It kind of just bothers me as a character. Like, he should have just listened to Lorien and blew up Earth. Like, let's be real. Ultimately, a lot of the plot bothered me because of Hadrian as a character, because of the fact that he isn't a character anymore. He is just a mouthpiece for his god, and everything that comes out of his mouth is damn near, this is correct because God said so. And that's why I'm doing this, because God said so. And that if that wasn't the angle that this went, I think I would have enjoyed this so much more, even with the other flaws. Like, those flaws still exist. That was the main thing that took it away from me, though, was this is not one of 10 POV characters. Like, this is your guy that you're following, and that's what he became as a character, and that's just not interesting to me. And what's weird now is if you back the Kickstarter for the Empire of Silence Special Edition, there is a foreword written by, let me grab it, This version of Empire of Silence, right? It has essentially a foreword that is, what do they call it? Just introduction. It's from the 15th Keeper of the Dead of Thessa and Servant of the Absolute God. This whole thing is just like this epic space opera that was retold by Hadrian is now just boiled down to Hadrian is God's chosen. Everything that Hadrian did was because God made it happen. I don't like that religious argument in general, especially not in my sci-fi. Like, make changes to the text, which I remain ignorant. In places, I have made alterations to bring the text nearer to what I know to be the truth. The truth. The truth is that Hadrian Marlowe was chosen. Chosen not by Mother Earth, as many have claimed, by the false goddess of the Black Priests, but by the one first, he who stands above all things, who hands down judgment among the gods, who alone is worshipful and true. He who is called the Quiet, by the wise, and the hidden one by William, he who was in the beginning, who made all by his will, the absolute God. It was the absolute God who commanded my Lord Hadrian to destroy the pale inhumans and the wakeful ones, their masters. This he did at the appointed time, in the appointed way, with the weapons the one caused to be made and to fall into his hands. May the peace of the absolute God be upon you and his grace guide your way. Like, I'm sorry. If this is going to offend some people, if y'all are religious and you get down with this, that's cool. You do you. That's not the kind of sci-fi that I thought I was reading. Like, this should have just been Christian sci-fi. And that's why I'm struggling with the series as a whole, because the entirety of, well, I guess most of the entirety of Sun Eater was in his jail cell pre-execution. At least that's what we got a couple books ago. Like, that's where he's been writing all this from. But then clearly he dies, he gets hanged, and then comes back and is writing about it again. Because at the end of this book, he's talking, well, one, he literally writes about his own hanging. But after, he's talking about, like, I'm not going to tell you what I did afterwards. I'm not going to tell you of Selene. All of this is so cool. And to me, personally, it's all soured by the fact that it was just divine intervention. All of this was set forth because the absolute God said so. So for me, that doesn't work at all. And the fact that now everything that we've read, everything that happened, was just because God made it happen at the point in time when God decided it was going to happen. That makes your character less interesting. I'm sorry. It just does. Like, I still, at least without rereading it, I love the other books, but I feel like they're now, like, there's like a cloud over all of it because I know how it ends. And I know that everything since the beginning now has just been because God is playing Puppet Master. And, like, that's boring. That doesn't do anything for me. That takes away everything that Hadrian was as a character. Like, yeah, I get it. He was brought back the first time when he becomes half mortal and, like, he was killed and comes back. But like at that point in the story, we still had the CL. Like, where are the Cielson? The Cielson aren't even characters anymore. Dereiko was trying to be God, and like his downfall was boring. And they're not even a threat anymore. They barely even exist in these books anymore. Like, the Cielson are aboard the ship. The Cielson attacked. Show them. If you've watched up to this point, feel free to tell me I'm a dipshit in the comments down below. Let me know where you agree or wholeheartedly disagree with whatever I've said. I fully expect a lot of people to disagree with me on that. Which again, I think if the whole plot and series was not held up on and reliant on the fact that it was just God making things happen, I feel like the story is just better. As soon as he became this like preachy, annoying character, and then everything is just from the lens of like he's God's chosen, and that's why everything happens because God makes it happen for Marlowe. I don't know. It's just not it for me, man. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below how much you disagree. I'm just frustrated that the series I fell in love with ended the way that it did, and what it chose to focus on as its final sticking point and message, just total miss for me. So that's where we're at. Until next time.